All right, Quentin, this is episode 10 of the Nervous System Training Podcast. I forget the stats, but when I first started my first podcast, I think it was like 92% of people never make it to episode 10. So from everyone who's ever done a podcast, we're in the top 8% of successful podcasts at this point, or give or take. But yeah, we can dive in. We were talking about Brian McGinty. I know a lot of people I've been talking with in the program have seen his stuff too. There's a lot of overlap. I know you guys have a bit of a relationship, so let's go through some of his content, talk about some of the similarities, highlight some of the things he's doing really well. All right, so here we are. This is his Instagram page. It's Power Plus, and the E in Power is a 3.
Power with a 3. Okay, so did you want me to
Yeah, just
kind of
what do you
describe
see
what's
here?
going on?
What do you see here? I know in your system there's some of the step drill too. It's little different patterns, but what do you like about this?
All right, so so with this drill, this is like a speed slash reaction drill. You know, you can call it like in my program it's called agility stepper because that's what most people have. Or it's like a form of low-level plyo. And with this, you got a couple things. It's a partner exercise, which is awesome. There's an athlete, it's one in the red, I think her name is Maddie. He's been training her for a really long time. So if you want to see what years of proper nervous system training development can get you, she's been in the system for, I think, 5+ years. But they're doing different forms of agility step. You got 2 feet on the box, 2 feet off. You got 1 foot hops. You got left, right, and so what he's trying to do is, I can't hear it, but I imagine Brian is doing call outs. Where he'll tell him to do this, he'll tell him to do that. He'll change 2 steps. However he describes his calls. And so what the athletes are doing is, I believe, they are trying to compete with each other, who can go faster, so there's competitive elements. I don't know exactly how he's constructing the drill. It looks almost like a musical chair sort of thing. There's a bunch of different ways you can kind of construct a reactive drill.
It looks like he's calling out right and left, or clockwise and counterclockwise, and then they're trying to kind of catch each other. One thing I like about this drill too is, and it seems kind of like an accident just based on the setup, but since the pad is light, it moves. So when one person steps on it, it's a lot of times it's like just moving just a fraction of an inch while the other person's still in the air. But I like that reactive component.
Yeah, that just, like with that, you're going to get more improvised movements. Like in the jiu-jitsu world, we call it scrambles. And I think that's a really important aspect to add to your training, because a lot of sports happen under intense chaos, and especially unpredictable chaos. There's a ton of variables onto the body. But yeah, okay, so he's saying, it's left, right, clockwise, counterclockwise. They're trying to, catch up to each other, so there's a competitive element. So yeah, this is a freaking great drill. Like, I love doing drills like this, because if it has like a low-level plyometric, so it's gonna not overload, but it's gonna increase the stretch shortening action slightly than just say, just being flat on the ground. You have like coordination. You got to get your feet on the box. You have reaction, so you have to worry about this person, how fast they're moving, combined with the directions that you're hearing. And a lot of sports have all these elements wrapped around them. Like if you look at basketball, basketball is not done silently. Like your coach is yelling at you, your teammates are making calls. This kid in front of you, maybe he's talking shit. You got the crowd, but you have to do all these different play reads and all these different problem-solving, variables that are going to hit you while you're tired, while you're fatigued, while you're trying to move as fast as possible. So the more you can introduce elements that hit the same mechanics that you're going to face in your game, they don't have to be the exact same elements. And a lot of people get that confused, where they think that you can only work these kind of things in a basketball game or in basketball practice. But that's absolutely false. You can because if you look at the idea of like training, training in general, back in the day, there was no cross training. Everyone would just do their sport as hard as they can, and their sport, the act of doing the sport, would make them stronger, right? That imagine old school NBA from the 70s. Wasn't a lot of strength and conditioning. They're just playing a shit ton of basketball, and naturally you're going to get stronger. You're running, you're jumping, you're pushing your body, etc. And so what sports training is that where they're finding ways to isolate certain physical mechanics and physical expressions using series of tools to overload those mechanics so they become stronger. So all of what you're seeing here, even though you may not exactly do this exact footwork pattern in your sport, what it's doing is it's overloading a couple mechanical features that are going to show up in your sport, such as ground contact time, changing of directions, coordinating your feet. And with the box being 6 inches, now we're adding a slight strength quality to it. So you can't do as much as you would play soccer. Like the volumes are entirely different. So because we're trying to maximize the output, we're adding a little elevation. We're doing at a peak set quality, like nothing slow, nothing to failure, just positive, fast stimulation into the body. Now we're increasing the mechanic potential. So when they go back on the field, those biomechanics are going to work more efficiently, and they can turn that into techniques.
One thing I'm noticing here is this track star here, and you were talking about her. She's been in the program a long time, and I've seen her on the page, but she's got the fastest feet, and it's interesting since of all the sports here, hers probably requires the least agility. Track it's in general, it's going to be straight, slow curves, whereas we got football, boxing, people who've got a lot of lateral movement and stuff like that, but her lateral movement's off the charts. It's just interesting to see.
Yeah. Now, I would say, like, Brian and her have been working together for a really long time. I first remember seeing her on his Instagram back in 2017. Wow. Like, before me and Brian were even viral. Like, way back in the day. I think he had only, maybe 12,000 followers at the time. I think she was, in high school, like a freshman in high school. And now a lot of this is speculation, right? Because I don't want to speak for Brian's program. I don't know exactly Brian's program. The way he's doing it and the way him and Gary are trying to evolve it. But I can kind of make predictions based on what I see. But I would make the argument that if you have an athlete that's mostly a linear athlete, moves straight forward like track, it would actually be better for her longevity to incorporate a series of dynamic modalities into her training system, because our bodies are not designed for just one direction at one speed. That's going to create over patterning on the body, and that can create injury over time. Perfect example is like hockey players with their calves. They always have calf issues because their way their foot is stuck in the ice skate and the way they skate. It's really hard on the calf. So naturally, I noticed when I was training hockey players and I was doing a more dynamic movement, more movement that got the calf stronger, got them more reactive, doing more footwork that was kind of closer to a football or a basketball player or a soccer player than a hockey player, his issues start going away. Because now he's adding more stimulus to create better regeneration, better healing, better longevity. Because we're designed for various amounts of chaos in all different dynamic directions, not just one movement pattern over and over again. It's going to create mechanical breakdown. So I think Brian and Maddie understand this. I hope her name is Maddie. Excuse me if I'm getting it wrong. But I believe they understand this aspect to her training, which is part of the reason why she's never been injured. She's always been phenomenal. And as you can see, even for a track athlete, she's moving better than half of these guys. Even this guy's a boxer. The one in the tracksuit, he's been working for Brian a really long time. Super dangerous boxer. Fucking really, dude, he's a really good fighter. He has some serious potential. But, like I said, hardly ever injured, or ever. They may have never been injured. They're always doing different dynamic footwork movements. They're hitting their bodies with all different forms of chaos and stimulation. It's just healthier for the body.
Yeah, I would imagine too that even in a relatively controlled environment, like a track where every course or every track is the same distance, there's always going to be some variation, whether it's the angle or the texture, or maybe there's one spot on one course that has a rough patch, or in the race, maybe one of the competitors is drifting over a little bit, and there's micro adjustments. But even if just micro adjustments, and in a competitive setting, like a small improvement in the micro adjustment, a small efficiency can be the difference in the victory. So
Hmm.
so even in a controlled environment, she's probably able to make those adjustments more efficiently than most people who aren't doing this agility training. I was going to ask too. You were mentioning a second ago about basketball and injury prevention. I don't know if you were watching the playoffs at all, but Jason Tatum just tore his Achilles, and a lot of basketball players have been tearing their
Oh, yeah.
Achilles simultaneously. A lot of them are a lot of these teams are doing load management techniques during the regular season, where the players aren't playing as many games. There's restrictions on their playing outside of the games during the season, since they don't want them to get injured, at the Y, like Michael Jordan used to do. But I was curious, do you have any I mean, the obvious conclusion is less playing during the season is leading to more injuries in these playoffs when everything is tense and everything's on the line. But have you seen this pattern, and do you have any thoughts on why there's so many injuries in the NBA these days?
Sure. Yeah. This could be a very complex issue, and I don't think there's just one answer. I think it's a layer. I think it's a series of problems that layer over each other. Which can make this really hard to identify. Now, I'm not a big watcher of the NBA right now because honestly, it's an embarrassment. I'm just going to keep it 1,000. It's nothing but flops and low quality effort games, just in my opinion. But I still do love basketball.
So that's the intensity thing that I think a lot of the old school and this kind of predates me. I didn't see Michael Jordan in his prime. I remember catching a couple games at the end on the Wizards, but I didn't feel that 90s 80s rough basketball. But there weren't as many non-contact injuries just statistically then. But do you think the intensity is changing, and that's changing the injuries?
It's hard to say because I'm guessing a lot because I don't watch a lot of modern basketball. But so there's a couple factors that I think about. Just given what you told me. Now, if they're playing less games, there could be variables that could lead to, overloading on training, maybe resistance training or weight training, while you have time in between those games, which could be possibly degrading the stretch shortening cycle, the speed quality of the athlete, creating too much tension in the elastic tissue or in the fascia. Then them suddenly getting back into it could be creating some issues. I don't know about you, but I always feel like if I take a really long time off of say jiu-jitsu, maybe I have to take a month off. I feel like I gotta work out a few times before I'm ready to get back into jiu-jitsu. Do you ever have that instinct?
Yeah, for me, the experience is that my mind knows what to do, but my body can't quite keep up, and so I end up overextending in certain parts, and it hopefully just strains, but definitely opens up the risk to tears and injuries.
Yeah, I feel like you're just not you could because being physically active almost creates, man, I don't know the words for this, so I'm going to try to explain it as best I can. But to me, I think there's a quality to your physicality and your ability to handle kinetic energy if you're doing it more often with less breaks. It's almost like a neurological buffering, to be able to resist, the forces and the lactic acid accumulation, whatever it may be. But
Yeah,
I
and
want to kind of think about your. Go
I've got
ahead.
an abstract understanding of this where I've thought about this exact thing, and I, like an object in motion stays in motion, right? Just from a physics, and if you think of humans, from the lifespan perspective, we're just buzzing around on the surface of planet Earth, but the faster you go, it's your body is just going to develop the repetition of moving quickly, and it's just going to be easier to kind of buzz around a little faster over the surface. There's a momentum aspect to it.
Well, you adapt to it.
Yeah, your body becomes not only used to it but almost reliant on the movement.
Yeah, well, because when you adapt to it, Well, okay, so think of this: what's the worst thing you can do for your body?
Stagnation, just
Yeah, sedentary. We constantly need use stress hitting our bodies to create cellular regeneration. So, back to your NBA idea, your NBA question. These sudden increases of soft tissue tears, especially non-contact injuries. Well, I worked this out with my ChatGPT. I spent an hour on this, Trying to figure out why there's so many non-contact injuries in women's soccer, especially in college. The ACL tears is through the roof. The non-contact injuries are insane in female soccer right now across the nation. And they were never this high. Granted, there weren't as many athletes training, weren't as many bodies per capita, okay. But if you just look at sports in general, the amount of non-contact injuries across all sports in the past 20 to 30 years has increased by an insane number compared to, like, say, the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I believe a lot of that has to do with the weight training system. I think I really do. Now, let me break this down. So, can you pull up an image of, say, like pull up an image, Google image like muscle imbalance or something like that, just so I can kind of have like a visual to guide the viewers along with. So as Jake's finding that, so here's a concept to think about with these non-contact injuries, is that every human being has primary and secondary muscles, and they also have compensating patterns in their body. Everyone does. No one is perfect. No one has like perfect balance to their body. Everyone has maybe overdevelopment of their quads compared to their hamstrings. Their anterior tibialis that feeds into their quadricep is tighter. Their glutes are not functioning properly. One of the serratus muscles might not be working efficiently. Okay, so go ahead and click right where your mouse cursor was. Oh wait, that was my mouse cursor. No, I'm sorry. Scroll down. Keep scrolling. Stop right there. Now go to the image in the middle of all the images. It's going to have like a series of bodies. Yeah, click that. No, you're just on it. No, not the bodybuilder. No, the one that was right next to it with all those different people standing. Yes. All right, can we make that larger? Okay, so if we can pull this image up, this will give us like a really good visual to kind of help people help the viewers understand what I'm trying to say. Okay, here we go, perfect. Okay, so here's like here's like a chart that shows like similar muscle imbalances. A variety of different compensations that people have. Now, like I was saying before, everyone has compensation somewhere. No one is perfect. And you can test for these. That's what we do with the athletic assessment. We want to test for strengths and weaknesses, and all these imbalances is just a variation of strengths and weaknesses. Now, it's not to say any of these imbalances are wrong. Like if you look at LeBron James has anterior pelvic tilt, but he's like a world class, generational athlete. But when you do have muscle groups that are weak, and you have other muscle groups that are tight, and you have these compensation patterns, that means kinetic energy is going to shear through those overactive muscle groups, the red, and shear less in the underactive muscle groups, just by the way your body's going to load and distribute kinetic energy. All right, your nervous system does this naturally. It's a way to keep it safe, because if you were to try to throw all the kinetic energy into like your hamstrings, and your hamstrings aren't very active, it could rupture them. So it has to distribute in a series of fascial lines and muscle patterns in a way where your body can handle those forces. Now, over time, those areas that are, say, overcompensating can overdevelop. They're getting hit with more kinetic flow than, say, the weaker muscle groups. And so what happens is that over a career of sports, if you're not managing those things properly, that they develop and they get more overloaded, and the other groups get less. Maybe they get a little stronger, but the imbalance starts to really increase over time. And so this kinetic energy also shears through these joints, shears through the ankles, the knees, the hips, the lower back. And these muscles, tendons, and ligaments and fascia help the body handle the shearing.
Can you explain specifically what you mean by shearing?
So shearing, like ripping through, like kinetic energy, like shears through the body, and it like frays down these tendons, and it frays them down, and then you heal, and it becomes thicker through calcium and cells. And does that make sense?
Yeah, same way you'd shear a sheep.
Exactly. Just like a sheep.
Yeah.
So yeah, but but imagine like violently traveling through, and kinetic energy doesn't just travel through the outsides of our body, like it rattles all the way through us. Like here's a crazy example of this, because we have cavities in our body. There's space in between the liquids, So when so I was reading about Ukrainian soldiers, that were fighting in the Donbass and against Russia. And some soldiers would describe when the mortar shells would land too close, they would know it gets too close because they can feel their teeth rattling in their skull. And I was like, teeth rattle? I was like, what the? I've never heard a description like that. So I got the old ChatGPT, and I'm like, like what is this teeth rattling thing? And it started explaining when an explosion happens near you, the immense kinetic energy that it forces out, when it hits your body, it rattles throughout your skeleton, your tendons, and your muscles. And your teeth are not like they're not permanently fixated to the skull. They're designed to wiggle so they can shake. And there's been instances of some soldiers losing their fillings from artillery fire during like the siege of Stalingrad in World War II.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's shearing. It like the kinetic energy like violently like rattles through your body. And so imagine, instead of like an explosion, imagine it's like jumping to slam dunk a ball, then hitting the ground again. Like, and imagine doing it like, how many times do you think let's say a college basketball player jumps as high as they can, then lands hard on a court? How many times do you think they did that in their lives?
Yeah, a million.
Millions of times. But their bodies learns how to handle it. Now, going back to this image, is that when you have a body that has these different compensators, and a training program is designed to mitigate these weaknesses as much as possible to avoid what I'm talking about, to avoid overloading certain muscle patterns or muscle sequences or whatever you want to call it, because when they overload, it can break something down somewhere else in the body, or the biomechanics might not be optimal. Maybe the knee kind of caves in a little bit. Maybe if you land on the outside of your foot too much, you don't have enough big toe pressure. And so that can create imperfections in your biomechanics, these compensation points, muscle weaknesses, whatever you got. And those they'll leak power, and it'll over shear on one angle of a joint more than the other. That's why people with knee valgus tend to get more meniscus damage to the leg over time. And that's also the reason why, like, people with high arch feet, they can't dorsiflex as well. Their feet can't pull. It gets stuck, always. Like, people with high arch feet, their dorsiflexion always sucks. And they're always naturally really tight. Tight feet, tight body. The fascia from the feet kind of determine the genetic makeup going up. And so what also happens? Oh, I lost my track of thought. I was going somewhere with this. Help me out, Jake.
The energy going up through the feet.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I remember. Oh, so high arch feet, dorsiflexion. So what I was trying to say is that because their dorsiflexion is lacking, it's hard for them to get their knees over their toes, keeping their foot flat. It's really difficult. So the kinetic energy shears through their patella tendon harder than, say, a normal-footed athlete does. And they usually get more jumper's knee.
Interesting. So,
yeah.
So my understanding of fascia is that depending on the health of it, the consistency of it changes. So unhealthy fascia would be super stiff, like scar tissue. Whereas healthy fascia is elastic, like a rubber band. So with this shearing, the more elastic one's fascia is, I would imagine, the better their body can withstand force and resist the breakdown in the shear. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a rubber ball versus like a I don't know, like a cue ball.
Yeah, or a clay ball. Just
sure. Yeah,
crumble.
Well, even still, even if you take a surface that has less elasticity, like say you take a cue ball, right?
Mm.
Too bad we don't have like a ton of different ball like types. Most of them are full of air, but you take like a rubber ball, like a solid rubber ball and a cue ball, made of resin. You drop them a million times, like say in 24 hours. Pick it up and drop it. That cue ball is going to start breaking down.
Yeah.
That rubber ball can handle it because it has more elastic properties, has more elastic qualities within the body. So it can absorb and recoil the kinetic energy more efficiently, less shearing down, less breakdown over time. And it can keep up with the shearing.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing. Athletes, sometimes their compensations are so large that they're overloading certain areas, and the tendons and ligaments can't replenish themselves fast enough for the next activity before it takes place again. So about the female soccer players is that women overwhelmingly are quad dominant, and that's to help them reach different angles of their pelvis for birthing. That's why they usually have larger quads and they usually have weaker glutes. That's why men's asses can look super rock hard, and even a really in shape woman, her ass still kind of looks, like not like that because it's less active naturally. So when you're having these natural compensators, and I'm using female athletes because they all naturally lean towards this. Now, there are of course exceptions to a rule, but if we're talking about millions of female athletes and a genetic makeup prone to quad dominance, we're going to get a common pattern that we're going to see over and over again. So when you're doing these heavy weightlifting routines, that these muscle groups that a lot of these traditional lifts like front squat, back squat, Zercher squat, a lot of them really hit the quad and the lower back, naturally just by the way the tool works. And so what I think is going on is that the areas that get overloaded or that are working harder, and you can test for this, like you can put someone like on a Bulgarian squat, and if they have an imbalance in one of their legs, their quad and knee is going to burn way more than say like their glutes are. And on the other leg it can be the opposite. Like so you can so your body's going to lean towards your imbalance, and it's going to veer away towards the weakness. It's naturally going to make those muscles over recruit. And so when you also do soccer on top of weightlifting, on top of all these different things, those muscle patterns are getting overloaded constantly. And so now the distribution of kinetic energy is not efficient. It becomes broken down. And Marv had a word for this. He called it equilibrium. When your agonist to antagonist muscle groups are working properly, you're working at a good muscular equilibrium. Secondaries with primaries, agonists with antagonist muscles. No. Is it antagonist and agonist? I can never remember.
Yeah, I flipped them. I think.
Oh, we got it right. Who cares? Yeah, terminology. So when you have those in balance and they're working properly, he called that muscular equilibrium. When they're out of balance, you start getting biomechanical deficiency, leaking power, overloading of muscle and tissue structures, and that can lead to shearing or an overload of a weak point, which could lead to rupture. So what I think is going on is that with these basketball players, they're falling into like a similar sort of idea. Maybe on these big breaks, and I'm just guessing, maybe on these big breaks between games, they still want to stay active. They don't want to be sedentary. That's uncomfortable. So they play extra basketball. They do extra workouts. Maybe they hit the weight room more, and hey, it's a good time to get stronger. Then I'll get back into bed. I don't know. On top of these athletes of today's NBA are generating more force than say NBA of the 90s. So maybe you can kind of look at this just by their biomechanics. Like the game is faster. The techniques are sharper. The changing of direction is tighter than it is in like the 90s and 80s, without a doubt. But that means that each basketball player per athlete is throwing more force. The rate of force development is getting higher and higher and higher. So I think it's creating the right scenario of way more powerful athletes combined with training methodology that could overload improper muscle sequencing or make them tighter, make them mechanically deficient, and maybe some less activity, a little less activity throughout the season. I think all these things kind of layering on top of each other can be a recipe for disaster, because all the non-contact injury is an overloading of eccentric forces that the tissue can't handle. That's all it is.
Yeah,
you know?
Let me show you a quick video of Jason Tatum doing a squat. So Jason Tatum, best player on the Celtics, the defending champs. They were.
What are you saying, Jake? Sorry, the volume went up.
Yeah, sorry. So Jason Tatum, best player on the Celtics, the defending champs. They before he just got injured, they were the title, favorites. But this is him doing a squat. He just tore his Achilles. Basically, it was a non-contact injury.
I've seen this guy do a little flopping.
yeah. So yeah, this video was taken earlier this year, but I don't know what if you were advising a basketball client, what would you have them do? And if you saw them doing this, what would you think?
I mean, it depends. Depends on what his goals are, what phases he is in his training, where he's at in his season. You know,
it's a little instability.
I don't know. Really,
it's nothing that crazy, but
no,
I don't know.
I don't think trap bar deadlifts are that bad. I think I would probably want him to do it a little differently. Like if he's off season, he wants to throw in some trap bar deadlifts, like it's platform, so he's only getting about like a low flexion. He's getting like a quarter flexion out of the legs. I think it's all right. You know, I don't think it's really gonna ruin an athlete. You know, if they do it. I think it needs to be programmed properly. I would prefer him doing something else, to be totally honest. But if that's all he got now. You know, I'm not gonna lie. His calves look a lot more structurally defined than the proportion to his quadricep.
Yeah, he does have pretty small quads.
You know, and okay, so I'm just gonna say like my instinct, just kind of watching him, and throw more clips so I can see more of his biomechanics. The more I can look at him, the better I can kind of determine maybe why he was prone to something like this. So yeah, there we go. Let's get a look at his legs. So he's a very long tendon-driven athlete. Like look at those hamstring tendons. And looking at some of his videos, he doesn't seem like he develops a huge amount of like his muscle bellies aren't huge. Now his calf development looks a little higher than his quad development. You know, maybe that matters, maybe not. But that would kind of like, I would maybe wonder if maybe his calves do a lot more of the work than say his quadriceps. And the reason why I say this is because I've seen something similar. If you look at Muay Thai fighters in Thailand, a lot of them don't have very defined quads. I mean, it's defined, but their calf to quad ratio is insanely disproportionate. Like their calves and feet are huge. You know, these Muay Thai fighters in Thailand in comparison to their quads, because they use them more. It gets more work. It gets more development. Now their sport kind of pushes that onto their bodies. Some guys might just have that naturally. You know, it could be genetic. Maybe they just don't hold a lot of strength in the legs naturally, but their quads do, and their quads kind of overcompensate. I would really like to see his feet. If I can see him barefoot, I could really get a lot more idea of why this happened to him. But yeah, that's just interesting.
See the video of the tear. This is what happened. So he just was that right? He basically just left his heel behind.
Yeah. So it's like I said, like it's a big eccentric force. You know, everything is eccentric forces. That's why power shouldn't be a priority. It should be rate of force development. And then when you overload that, you know, a lot of that is, I would ask the question: how does a basic movement like that, right? How does that blow out the calf of an athlete that's supposed to be this advanced?
Yeah.
There's obviously something going wrong with how the tissue is handling mechanical load.
Look at his feet in this video. See how much they move, and his knees.
Yeah,
It's much less stable.
sure. You always
It's
got these silly, like the basketball shoes are
yeah,
absolutely
and he's had
ridiculous.
them in every single exercise. I mean, which makes sense. That's his. Maybe he wants to train like he's going to compete, but there's so much foam in the basketball shoes that his feet have to
Yeah.
be lagging behind.
So if we were to reverse engineer, like go back to his injury, if we were to reverse engineer the physics of an injury, then we can start to accumulate some evidence to why his body didn't handle the physics. There we go. It's right there. So it's his right foot. His
Yeah,
right
it's when
foot
he
went out.
steps back. It's,
So his foot with the rash guard on it. Yeah.
yeah. You can
Okay.
it's kind of blocked. Oh, this is a better angle. Yeah, right there.
Yeah. So that's nothing crazy. Minimal movement. So why does the tissue rupture on an overload of that on a loading situation like that? Now it looks oddly similar to what happened to that one NFL player. When do you remember that he like blew out his Achilles tendon?
Was that
He was
Deshaun Watson? That one or a different guy?
I don't remember these guys' names. It went viral like a year ago, where he was
Yeah.
coming off the sideline and it just blew out.
Oh, that was Trey Greenlaw in the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same movement pattern.
Yeah, exactly.
Back leg, same leg. So to me, this is telling me a lot of things. One, that maybe their neurological, their proprioceptive developments, probably isn't running super efficiently, especially overloading on the forefoot. It could also show that maybe he has. Man, if I were to guess, this seems like the balance between the muscle firing of his calf to his hamstring to his glute, something's not firing correctly, and the calf is doing all the work. It overloaded and it blew.
Yeah.
So to me, this kind of you know what I'm gonna think.
What's that?
This is the fault of the trainer. You should assess, if you're dealing with these NBA players, there should be a trainer in there that manually muscle tests every goddamn joint angle, biomechanical movement pattern you have, from the bicep to the tricep, even to the fucking strength of the fingers. If this is my NBA team, I'm like, you're testing everything on these guys, because weakness leads to compensation, compensation leads to overload, overload tears tissue. So something in his posterior chain, and I know it's posterior chain because when your leg fires out that far back, that here in hip extension, you're reaching leg, you're at leg extension and you're reaching into hip extension. Now there's a very similar injury that happened to CrossFit athletes at last year's CrossFit Games. They had this giant like plyo box that was like 5 feet across by like 5 feet high. Right, and they were like, "Oh, they got to climb it," and they were trying to make it harder for the CrossFit athletes to try to navigate through it. And a bunch of them tore their calves because they would try to hop it, keep one hand on the box that hit the ground, and they were all the way in that extended position. So when you extend like that, if that hamstring and glute aren't supporting some of the kinetic energy, some of the flow, the calf takes it. The calf is doing all of it. Or it did enough where it couldn't handle it. That on top of training and poor foot patterns, on top of man, I can't remember his name. The foot fascia glute connection probably not being well established. So now you got all forefoot. He's on the forefoot and the toes, which aren't used to firing, aren't used to loading, because he's always doing his strength training in fucking shoes. You
So,
know, yeah.
so, so if you were his trainer, like what types of movements would you emphasize to account for this imbalance where he's over dominant in the calves?
Well, you got to test him. You got to test it. You got to test him to see what it actually is. It could be anything. You know, it could be. It could be maybe like. It could be like. God, I don't know. It could be the hamstrings. It could be the glutes. It could be a glute medius imbalance. You know, which is overload, which is forcing the other muscles to overload it. It could be his erector spinae. Maybe his erector spinae are way too tight, you know, and they're not helping stabilize the pelvis properly, which is throwing the pelvis backwards, which is shutting the glutes. It could be a lot of things. I would say he's got to get tested. Test the strength of his hamstrings, the strength of his feet, the strength of his toes, the strength of his hip extension, the strength of his lower core. You know, does his lower abdominal pelvis, can he throw his pelvis into posterior tilt, you know, by a couple of millimeters to activate his glutes? And all those things, you know, we gotta do it one step at a time. Then, once we have that built out, you know, we start introducing modalities that are going to address it, especially the feet, especially getting his foot and his toes. Another thing to think about, he's never used to engaging his toes. Now that I'm looking at this more, the way his foot lands, his toes are taking a huge amount of force. Like it's like, because it's not so much where his midfoot's not really making contact at all.
Yeah.
So when you do calf raises, like this, like here's my foot, and you go all the way up. We go all the way up to the toes. Like we'll hold a pull-up bar, kind of pull ourselves up, and we'll go all the way to the edge of our toes like a ballerina and come down. And you feel an insane amount of contraction in your calf. So I'm going to actually, looking at this more, this is a poor sequence, a severe weak point, because NBA, I'm just going to be prejudiced, NBA players have the fucking worst feet because all their feet are shaped like their stupid NBA shoe. You know, they all have like these meat blocks. They're all shaped like this when you pull their feet out of their shoe. So his toes are probably not working properly. The fascial connection between the toes into the glute, not sequenced very well, not well trained. He's used to developing force probably through the hip instead of through the foot, which is a mistake. And then you do a weird movement where you call upon all the weak muscle groups that are never trained to handle the whole body. Because if you look at his front leg, when you're in that split stance position, that front leg is not really bearing any load. It's all the back foot. His foot doesn't even make contact with the ground until after the tear.
Yeah.
There you go. Problem solved.
Yeah, you can see when the Knicks guy steals the ball, it's his hips kind of react and shoot a little forward, but his foot was already going back, so then he ends up a little over his foot. Only his toes strike, and then yeah, he just doesn't. He just doesn't have this.
Yeah, this is poor toe control. This is poor toe placement. You know,
and I want to go back to the heavy squat that he did. Where was that one? Since I was looking at this one. I had this one off for a sec. Look at his toes, especially in that right foot, but they're moving a lot. Like,
yeah, because he's got these weird rubber blocks on his feet.
Zero, the brand Zero with an X, and Knees Over Toes guy both have basketball shoes now. And Zero has barefoot shoes. Knees Over Toes guy has minimalist shoes. But for anyone out there, those are some options these days.
Yeah, just take your goddamn shoes off when you train. Like, it's not that big a deal, guys. You know, or get some Vibrams. Yeah. Like, you know, like you're gonna get made fun of, which is fine, and you're definitely not gonna get laid at that gym, but you're not gonna tear your calf in the NBA.
Yeah.
Well, yes, there you go, man. That's what I think caused it.
Yeah.
I think just poor training methods. Now, here's the thing. Like, why isn't this even being addressed? Like, how much money do they have to invest in this guy?
Yeah, I mean, this guy makes $50 million a year. Like, that's $1 million a week.
How much is their trainer on that team making?
The Los Angeles Lakers just posted a listing for a trainer for $250,000 a year, which seems like silly
Bro, so
relative to
how are they? So here's the thing here's what is so crazy. How is this? This is supposed to be the state of the art, the best of the best. The National Basketball Association. This is where shoes get made with Chinese slaves. You know, like this is where, like, so. How do you not have the ability to identify these things? You know, how do you not have the time, energy, and resources? You know,
the
to
problem is I think it's just like people don't know. Like whoever's hiring that strength and conditioning coach doesn't understand what to look for. You know, it's like I think that's part of
that's
the problem.
unacceptable. $250,000. You're working with a $40 million athlete. Unacceptable. Use your
Working with like three $40 million athletes. You know.
Yeah, use your common sense. Use your common sense. Like this is where like it's so weird how people think that your feet are not a factor. Like you would never do that to your hands. Like actually there was a football player that runs around barefoot. I can't remember his name. He's got like
Max Hollins. He's awesome.
Yeah, Max Hollins. He did the same analogy that I always do. He's like, you would never like wear mittens all day. Like that'd be so fucked up. He's like, why would you do this to your feet? I'm like, thank you. You know, like, would you want weak hands? Have you ever shook someone's hand and it felt weak?
Yeah, you notice it instantly.
Instantly. You know, that's why men shake hands. Because it's a way for us to identify, okay, can you actually be violent with me? You know, it's a vetting process a little bit.
Yeah.
It's the way we can sense each other.
Absolutely.
Why would you ever your feet do more work than your hands?
Yeah.
Like without your hands, life sucks. But you'll manage. Without your feet, man, that's way harder than without your hands. Your feet are everything. So, yeah, like I don't understand. It's crazy that these trainers that are supposed to be working with this actually, you know what I believe the problem is? Controversial take. The problem is that these professional athletes have way too much say in what happens to their body. That's what I think the problem is.
Honestly, the NBA, which has this influx of injuries, also has a reputation for being the most player-driven league. Like they have the most, like NBA players in general, they have 3 years left on their contract. They want to be traded, they're going to get traded. They kind of get what they want. They've got, since it's only 5 guys on a team. If you're the best player
LeBron.
on the NBA team, yeah, exactly.
Since LeBron went to the Heat.
Yep, it's so now we've got all these players calling all the shots. But they don't understand the value of the toe strength.
So here's, you know, and honestly, it's going to take this. It's going to take some superstars losing their careers for other athletes to wake up, you know, and stop thinking they know what they're talking about. There's a reason I stopped working with professional athletes. There's a reason. I don't want to speak for anyone else. I don't want to speak for anyone else. But man, I got some freaking stories for some coaches who train some world champion boxers and UFC fighters. Boy, do I have some stories. So I've worked with a lot of different coaches. I've had a lot of different mentors. You know, I've watched a lot of documentaries. Working with professional athletes is the biggest fucking pain in the ass you will ever have to deal with in your whole training career. They want everything their way. They're always being catered to. They're spoiled. They have insane egos. They're annoying. Straight up. Like there's so many professional athletes that hit me up that I pass on because like, no, dude, I don't want to fucking deal with you. Like that you want it this way, you want it that way, we need to do. It's like, no. Like stop trying to take control and trust your fucking coaches. Straight up. And the problem is that they're so rich and powerful now, and because the NBA is in a victim mindset, they're victims of everything. Everything is like we got to fly all the way to Minnesota for a preseason game. Why do I even have to buy? Because we pay you. Because we pay you.
$1 million a week.
Yeah, because you're allowed to retire your mom and you're on TV, you fucking princess. Get to fucking work like a man. Sorry, I'm just like, it's so annoying. Some of these professional athletes. Now, it's not everyone. There's some pro athletes that I worked with that were phenomenal. Hardworking, disciplined. They gave me trust. They gave other coaches trust. You know, there's a word for it. It's called coachable. but it's become harder and harder to be coachable. I think a lot of it's my generation's fault. I think because we were raised to believe that everyone should get a participation trophy, and now, dude, have you ever noticed how much power like little kids have in the family these days?
Yeah.
Dude, it's fucking ridiculous. Like, I don't want to make this political, but go on YouTube and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's not hard to identify. But now you have like this whole shift where like respecting your elders and trusting your coach, and listening to your mentors kind of like went out the window somewhere in the 90s. Some of the 90s it kind of like started to fall apart, right? Maybe it was 9/11, I don't know. Or maybe this is a participation trophy of the millennials, so everyone thought they're going to grow up to be winners. Somewhere along those lines. But yeah, I think these players, not just the NBA, but professional athletes in general, have way too much control of their training system. Like, way too much control. And they're doing what they like to do, not what they should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta, I have the idea of bottleneck isolation. Like, you gotta figure out the bottlenecks, the points of friction in the system, and overload those to get the most results. But it's more fun to just focus on what you're good at. All right, I've got
There's just got to be I was going to say, there's got to be a mentality shift with athletes.
Yeah.
Like they can't. So that's part of the reason why. That's why Dana White will never pay fighters very well, because he knows when your athletes out leverage the promotion, it starts to destroy itself from the inside out, and that's what happened with boxing. That's what's happening with the NBA. And it's gonna happen with the WNBA. Because they just lost Caitlin Clark. She moved to Europe. She's like, fuck all this. Like, you guys are a bunch of assholes.
I missed that. Damn.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's not like you didn't miss nothing.
Yeah.
It's the WNBA. Let's be real.
That's crazy. It's interesting how these sort of like non-physical aspects, like we've talked about emotional drive, and that's kind of been a theme that comes up in a lot of these episodes. But this is along that same lines. But it's interesting how much your nervous system is dependent on these sort of like accessory variables. All right, I'm gonna pull some video.
Yeah, what's the next thing we're checking out?
I'll pull up some videos of me doing some of the ball work.
Let's look at it.
Here we go. This is just kind of...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Silent.
So we got shoulder pulses.
Yeah. This is my favorite one. It's just the simple. I mean, it's my favorite one to start with. These ones I'll get out of rhythm. Shoulder pulses are.
So, question: Why grabbing it by the palms and not by the handles? What was your idea there?
I don't know. I think in the next one I do switch it. I don't remember. I don't know. I think I did it with both. I don't know what I think the idea was not rolling over. I know you keep the palms up when you go over the middle. On that one, I was keeping them down because the internal rotation on my shoulder was bothering me a little bit.
So let's do this. Start the video from the beginning, and I'll kind of give you a description of each exercise and what what they're targeting. So shoulder pulses. This is a good fast twitch exercise. You can also add layers of different things to this. Like you can do coordination, like you can do one arm like this, one arm in front. Then you can go out. You can rotate the core while keeping the pelvis the same. Just find different ways. And you don't have arms extended. Like you can do it up close. You can do it far away. It's great for reigniting the fast twitch mechanism within the shoulder extension.
One thing.
Now, these are a variation. What?
Yeah, I'm not doing it in this video, but I have these things. I like holding this as tight as I can in one hand, and then the water ball in the other hand. for the coordination.
Interesting.
It's since it's all the way tense on one side, but you have to still maintain. It's interest. It's yeah.
So,
These
well, we had the
ones,
crossover. Is this the pendulum swing?
yeah, it gets
Now,
it's not
when
smooth.
you see your foot, the reason why you're losing, there you go. Now you're dorsiflexing your foot.
Hmm.
See how you can kind of like you want to make sure you keep it dorsiflex. I can tell like
Yeah,
your
then I was
internal
just going up to the
rotation.
top, and then now I start opening it up. I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
so I
yeah, it's
can kind
hard.
of tell by what your foot's doing, Jake. Your foot's kind of wanting to do this. Like here's your pinky toe. It's
Yeah,
wanting to fold like this.
that's what
So
just
it's
happened at
showing.
the end there too. It rolled off.
Yeah. So it's a sign that you probably are lacking strength in your internal rotation, glute minimus.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
I
that
have
pinky toe,
prone to.
yeah, that pinky toe flaring out directly connects to your medius and minimus muscle groups. You know, the figure eights. This is good for developing like hand coordination, training the tendons and ligaments out of the hand.
This is way harder than it looks. This, I think you- it's not looking smooth. Before I recorded this take, there was like 3 takes that were even less smooth.
Yeah. So what I would do is that your intensity is really high, which is good, but you're starting to hit the intensity threshold where you're tightening yourself.
Okay.
You know, I can kind of tell like by the way you're
Yeah.
like clinching. So what you want to do is when you push up your intensity, make sure you keep your face relaxed
Okay. I like that.
because the tension in your face, I think, is okay. Here's a crazy idea, but you know how like the feet sort of create tension throughout the legs and it's a lower back. I think tension in the face creates tightness throughout the torso.
I honestly, I agree with that. When I was a kid, I had this issue where I'd grind my teeth. I just had tension, and it was like my whole um,
Yeah.
back was just. I was just always tense up here. And I had these migraines, really bad migraines. Like I would be tripping, like visuals, like I'd wake up on the ground and the grass would be or the carpet would turn to grass. It was like these
What?
crazy tension headaches. And at some point in like my late teens, early 20s, I realized that like I'd been tense for multiple days every time I had one of these migraines. Like leading up to it, there was a period of tension. This one I was trying to experiment with coming off the ball, but it's pretty hard
Yeah,
to come back
it
down.
doesn't work too good. I tried it.
No, it felt cool. Um, but yeah, at some point I realized like, oh, if I just keep my face relaxed, I won't grind my teeth as bad. And over the years, I got better at um, building those patterns. I haven't had migraine in years now, but I feel like my upper body posture has also improved in those efforts.
Yo, I wonder if there's people in their apartment buildings like, what the fuck is my guy doing out there in
Oh
the
yeah,
grass?
they know I'm the weird guy. I'll be out there in a weight vest with my dogs, and I'm always doing something.
You remind me of me a lot, Jake. I was doing shit just like this outside my apartment building in 2016, learning the nervous system training.
Yep. I've got
But
a set up in my house too, but it's such a nice day today.
yeah, so these are like kickback movements. These are lower body movements. You know, they're really good because you can create like a strength and stretching quality into the leg. And all these ball work movements is designed to redevelop elasticity, neuromuscular efficiency, how well like your spine can communicate with the rest of your extremities in your bodies. And also there's a eccentric strengthening and a lengthening portion to every exercise. So it's designed to make the tissue, the fascia, tendons, muscles, all that more elastic. You know, and that's going to help create more force generation. It's going to help turn your muscle tissue into something that's more reactive and elastic instead of something that's more reactive and stiff.
Yeah. All right, I've got one more. We can kind of skip through it a little bit, but this is from Jiu Jitsu Gym. So this is some of the doing a circuit, doing isometrics here, lower body ball work, and then upper body ball work. Just some of the younger guys at the jiu-jitsu gym.
Is a youth group?
No, these are this guy. He's in his early 20s. These guys are, I think Albert just graduated high school. This guy, he's new. These are just some of the jiu-jitsu guys who wanted to try the nervous system training.
I gotcha. So you got the overcoming isometrics. You got them on the hamstring hold.
Yeah.
How'd they do on the balance?
On the ball.
On the slant board.
Oh, well, so this is the spinning slant board, which is, all right, you can see, I kind of demo it here. So the idea was overloaded a little bit each round. Yeah, you can see, here they are on it. It's hard to balance on that spinning.
Kid's back is extending, boy. Kid is so hard down. His head's almost on the floor.
Yeah. But yeah.
So I tell them when you're doing those stretch pulses, especially if you're new guys, tell them to add a slight bend to their elbows because sometimes they'll overextend.
Okay.
And it can kind of feel like shitty on the elbows.
Yeah.
So get a little flexion in that bicep, kind of give them a little bit more tissue to work with.
Yeah. I got a little bit more here. It's a little redundant, but you got this guy doing the pendulum. It's Braden.
Yeah, so for new guys, I wouldn't do ankle weights for new guys. Just do the weight of the legs until they can develop some speed because there's so much of a learning process in the first couple sessions. You know, like they're going to be... And when you're working, here's like a tip. When you're working with people on the ball work training, I usually have my hand on their foot or a hand on the ball the whole time while they're learning the movement, especially like leg circles, pendulum swings, rotational kickbacks. Or you can grab their foot and you can like direct their foot in the position that you want it. Say like with the rotational kickbacks. So outside of the foot, I'll pull it in, twist it, extend it out. And I won't even like tell them what to do. It's like, hey, just follow along with my hand. Because here's the interesting thing. When their body feels something, it knows something. You know, so the more you kind of describe it with words, the harder it is for them. So I just grab and I pull them through the range of motion. Like I want you to go in, twist, extend. Pull it in, twist over, extend. And then I grab the other leg and you're going to circle it in, bring it together. Circle it in, bring it together. I'm like, all right, figure it out. And I'll give them like 10 minutes. Work on this till you got it. Yeah. Can't stop for 10 minutes. And they're going to look like shit the first couple of times they do it. They're going to be falling around. They're going to be struggling. But just give it time. You know, you can't get it right in one workout. You know, no athlete gets the ball work done good in their first session. But after like 10 minutes, it's going to start looking like something. Then once they get out both legs, like, all right, time to learn the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll say it all is harder than it looks.
Fuck yeah.
And it's like I'll be gassed after these training sessions. But yeah. Just kind of cycling back through here.
Good stuff. It's an interesting picture in the background on that wall. What's going on there? Is that like...
It's a guy up against the ropes.
Oh, okay. I thought that was like some Sistine Chapel type painting in the background. I'm like, bro, your coach is into some interesting ideas.
Yeah. All right, so some good stuff for today.
Yeah, what was that basketball player's name again?
Jason Tatum.
Jason Tatum?
Yeah.
Jason Tatum, you got to work on your toes, buddy. Hope you recover well.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You heard it here first. It's called a mystery, I believe.
Mm-hmm. It's honestly, I hope that he reaches out. I've seen other videos analyzing this injury since it happened, so hopefully some of the things that come out of it help him get back on the horse. I know the Achilles surgeries are getting a lot higher tech over the last few years. People are having more complete recoveries and faster recoveries, so all the best to him. But yeah, thanks, Quentin. Call it there for this week.
All right. Again, if everyone's got questions, feel free to throw your questions at Jake or myself.
Yeah. Like, comment,
And
subscribe.
yeah, and oh, you know the thing, anyone that's watching this, if you want us to like go over like a professional athlete that injured themselves or whatever, you know, if you want us to analyze like or react to certain clips, you know, feel free to send that over our way too.
Yeah, we want to make sure you guys are getting the content you want, and it also helps us have interesting things in the queue. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week.
All right.